U.S. assets moved to counter Iranian activities, and a Navy ship runs aground in the Persian Gulf. All that and more today, July 18, 2023. Good morning, Early Birds. I'm Simone Perez, and this is the Early Bird Brief, produced by Defense News and Military Times. First up, we have important news coming out of the Pentagon today. The U.S. is sending additional fighter jets and a warship to the Strait of Hormuz and Gulf of Oman. The move is an effort to increase security due to Iranian attempts to seize commercial ships there. The Pentagon said Monday that the USS Thomas Hudner, a destroyer, and a number of F-35 jets will be heading to the area. The Hudner had been in the Red Sea originally. Defense officials last week announced the deployment of F-16s to the area. There have been A-10 attack aircraft there for nearly 2 weeks in response to Iranian activity. The latest deployments come after Iran tried to seize 2 oil tankers near the strait earlier this month and opened fire on one of them. The aircraft are intended to give air cover for commercial ships and increase the military's visibility in the area. The U.S. Navy said in both instances the Iranian naval vessels backed off when a U.S. guided missile destroyer arrived on the scene. The Navy said the USS McFall remains in the Gulf region to continue protecting shipping lanes. Pentagon spokeswoman Sabrina Singh said it was not clear how long the ship and the aircraft will remain in the region.
In light of this continued threat, and in coordination with our partners and allies, the Department is increasing our presence and ability to monitor the strait and surrounding waters. We call upon Iran to immediately cease these destabilizing actions that threaten the free flow of commerce through this strategic waterway of which the world depends on for more than 1/5 of the world's oil supply.
The U.S. Navy says Iran has seized at least 5 commercial vessels in the last 2 years and harassed more than a dozen others. Many of the incidents have occurred around the Strait of Hormuz. Another important story, the House of Representatives narrowly passed the annual defense authorization bill on Friday. The vote was largely along party lines. Democrats withdrew their support for the $874 billion bill after several amendments on culture war issues made it into the final version of the bill. A provision in the bill bans the military from providing troops with paid travel leave to receive abortions if they live in states where it's no longer legal. Another provision also restricts medical care for transgender troops, and another eliminates diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And a fourth measure would prevent the Defense Department from implementing President Joe Biden's executive order that requires emissions reductions across the federal government. The Defense Department is the largest emitter of fossil fuels. Republican leaders put forth the social policy amendments to secure support from the House Freedom Caucus. Louisiana Representative Clay Higgins, who was a member of the caucus, said the vote represented a change in the party.
I must say that our Republican colleagues across the conference have been very receptive to the clear understanding that we had a lot of damage done in the military over the last 4 years and needed to be addressed. So this is what you're witnessing. You're witnessing a proper and effective correction of the injury that has been brought upon our military.
Democratic leaders did not whip against the bill despite their opposition. Only 4 Democrats joined Republicans in voting for the bill. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries called many of the amendments extreme.
Our view of the National Defense Authorization Act is that it is woefully irresponsible that extreme MAGA Republicans have hijacked a bipartisan bill that is essential to our national security and taken it over and weaponized it in order to jam their extreme right-wing ideology down the throats of the American people.
The House overwhelmingly rejected amendments that would have ended military aid to Ukraine. It also rejected an amendment to ban the transfer of cluster munitions to Ukraine. The transfers have already started after the Biden administration decided to send them last week. The administration hopes the cluster bombs will compensate for Ukrainian munition shortages. Several Democrats objected to the decision over concerns about their long-term risk the bombs pose to civilians. A bipartisan amendment would have banned the transfer of cluster munitions to every country, but Republicans did not allow a floor vote on that piece of legislation. Even before Republicans added these amendments, though, the White House objected to several of the bill's provisions. That included establishing a special inspector general for Ukraine aid and setting up a sea-launched nuclear cruise missile research program and procuring the next San Antonio-class amphibious warfare ship. In other news, a provision of that defense policy bill would ban service members from communicating with a civil rights group. For more on this, Military Times fellow Jaime Morcarillo joins us on the podcast today. So Jaime, what does this amendment do exactly?
So the actual language in the amendment is pretty broad. In essence, it tries to prohibit Department of Defense personnel from communicating with a particular civil rights organization and from taking any actions resulting from activity from this group.
So who exactly is this group that would be prevented from communicating with service members?
So the group is called the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. It was created in 2005 by an Air Force veteran, Mikey Weinstein. The group's stated goal is to protect service members from unwanted religious proselytizing and to enforce a strict separation between church and state within the Department of Defense and other sort of military-related federal agencies like the Department of Veterans Affairs.
And why are Republicans wanting this amendment in the bill?
So that's a good question. It's not entirely clear. The congressman that introduced the amendment, Representative Michael Turner from Ohio, he didn't really provide much elaboration about why his party is so keen on preventing service members from communicating with the MRFF. So the MRFF has frequently butted heads with conservative Republicans and Christian organizations in the past, though Weinstein makes a point of noting that the large majority of the organization's clients are Christian. But for example, back in February, the group successfully lobbied the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy to remove this big 190 square foot painting of Jesus from a public lobby into a chapel, into a prayer space. And Senator Ted Cruz wrote a letter criticizing the move. So the way Weinstein sees it, the amendment is part of the GOP's campaign or the campaign of more fringe parts of the Republican Party to enforce particular, he describes it as Christian nationalism, sort of pushing those values through the military. And he links it with other more conservative campaigns to, for example, limit the abortion rights of service members and limit the ability of transgender troops to serve.
Thanks, Jaime. There's still several steps before the bill would become law. The Senate will soon debate its version, and then negotiations on a final version of the bill will begin. For more conversations like that one, please like and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Also on your radar for today, the Navy is investigating the circumstances behind one of its ships running aground in Bahrain on July 15th. The Lewis and Clark class dry cargo ship Alan Shepard experienced the mishap at the Arab Shipbuilding and Repair Yard Company shipyard in Al Hid. A spokesperson with the U.S. Fifth Fleet said the ship didn't suffer any significant damage. A Navy commander said the Alan Shepard, with the help of tugboats, was able to maneuver at high tide to the pier in Bahrain. No personnel sustained injuries, and there was no operational impact. The vessel's crew is made up of more than 80 civilian mariners. It's unclear, though, how many were aboard at the time of the mishap. The Alan Shepard launched in 2006 and is named after the first American to enter space, the late astronaut and Rear Admiral Alan Shepard. In 2017, the guided missile cruiser Antietam ran aground off the coast of Japan near Yokosuka Naval Base after anchoring out due to high winds. An investigation determined the Antietam mishap was preventable. It resulted in $4.2 million in repairs and 1,100 gallons of oil spilling into the bay. And now here's some other stories we're hearing chirps about. Sensitive military information was accidentally sent to the country Mali, according to a report in the Financial Times. A Defense Department spokesperson told Military Times the department is aware of the issue. In case you missed it, President Joe Biden issued an executive order that would make it possible for 3,000 additional reservists to be sent to NATO's eastern flank. Senior military officials stress that this does not mean increasing the number of troops heading for Europe. It instead adds reservists to the shrinking pool of active-duty troops available for rotations there. And Russia is blaming Ukraine for an attack on a key Crimea supply bridge. It was the second major strike on the bridge since October. And on this day in history, in 1940, President Franklin D. Roosevelt was nominated for an unprecedented third presidential term. His third term was dominated by America's involvement in World War II. He was also reelected to a record fourth term in office. Congress limited presidential terms with the 22nd Amendment in 1947. It was not ratified until 1951, years after FDR's death. That's it for us this morning. To get more top stories and breaking news, go to defensenews.com/EBB to subscribe to the Early Bird Brief newsletter. Please give us a like, rating, and a comment wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media @defense_news and @Military Times. The Early Bird Brief is hosted and produced by me, Simone Z. Perez. Today's episode features stories by the Associated Press, Bryant Harris, Jaime Morcarillo, and Diana Stancy-Correll. Our editor-in-chief is Mike Bruce. Have a great day.